Hi, Andrew. Good to
Hello,
see you
Marie.
again.
Yeah, good to see you too.
How are you doing today?
Today I'm doing good.
Yeah?
Yeah, I was supposed to have a call before this, and the
Yeah?
person didn't show up, but
Ah,
it's funny how that's so I'm glad you showed up because I was
yeah.
like, man, if she doesn't, I'm showing up for you. If you don't show up for me, it's gonna be
Uh-huh.
frustrating.
Yeah. No,
But here we are.
I'm
So
showing up for you and you're showing up for me.
yeah, it's really
Yeah.
nice when that
Yeah,
happens
it
mutually.
is. I know. And we had a beautiful conversation last time. So, maybe we'll start a little bit about your background again, because it was fascinating what you've done in your life, essentially. Yeah.
Sure.
Just a little, you know, start there.
Yeah. So, do you have any specific questions, or should I just start wherever?
No, okay. So, there was this beautiful conversation about you uh, starting out in your golfing career, because I thought that
Hmm.
was like very metaphorical for you. You started out in your golfing career, and then that like transferred into a caddying career, and you made some pretty awesome successes with that, and just how your mindset like helped you through that whole journey essentially, and how
Hmm.
you got empowered in that process.
Yeah, which so thanks for thanks for just mirroring it back
Mm.
because through what I was sort of hearing as you were saying that is like I started playing golf when I was 7
Hmm.
and it I still remember this public golf course in Rochester, Minnesota where I grew up, and
Hmm.
there was this one hole on the backside where your very first shot you have to hit over this river.
Okay.
And so, it's like that's a lot of pressure in the
Like a
game to
crazy challenge right away.
yeah, but to be able to do that
Yeah.
and to hit a shot and have it go over and then have these adults be like, how are you able to do that?
Yeah.
And I'm a big guy. I'm 6'4", so I was pretty
Yeah.
big when I was a kid and I
Hmm.
played baseball and I liked batting.
Yeah.
But then, like you said, how that transitioned into ultimately becoming a caddy
Hmm.
and where I learned how to support someone else in that
Right.
process.
Exactly.
And and specifically the what I learned at the highest level was how much of like the human aspect of it.
Hmm.
The thoughts and the feelings, like especially caddying on the ladies tour,
Yeah.
the one of the first times I made a mistake, like a mistake in a major championship with
Yeah.
7 holes left to play, and
Yeah.
I'm communicating the best I can, and then all of a
Hmm.
sudden I can tell that the communication did not go well.
Hmm.
And that ends up leading to us finishing poorly. And then she's crying
Right.
and she's like, wants to fire me. And I can understand that we didn't do
Hmm.
well, but you
Yeah.
don't ever want to be like, yeah, I deserve to get fired.
Right. Right.
But really, this like, why are you crying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's intense, but I don't understand why you're crying.
Yeah.
And then later on that night, I went and cried and just felt, uh, didn't really know why I was feeling what I was feeling.
Hmm.
But it was not a fun day. But then you wake up the next day and you just go right back to it.
Hmm.
Um,
That's like
that's
building
what,
that beautiful resilience, of like failing, but then getting back on the horse again and just being like, okay, you know, that happened.
and I appreciate you saying resilience because I can
Mm.
look back and I can see to some extent I think it was resilience, but I also think too it's when you're like, well, what else am I gonna do? Like,
Mm.
and I actually and also part of why was in caddying and wanted to transition into coaching
Mm.
was seeing how, there's a small percentage of people that at whatever point in their life figure out exactly what they want to do for the rest of their life and say, if I could just do that every day, I'll be happy.
Mm.
And they're right. They're like golf fanatics and they play as much as they can and they play every day until the day they die.
Mm.
But even in terms of pro golfers, that's very rare.
Right. And also to be
There's
successful for that long so that you can like keep your game up and just like, keep on chugging away. It's not that easy to do for for an entire career, an entire, let alone like a whole game, right? It's like it
ex
takes you to
exactly.
like,
So then at whatever point that you decide that maybe you want to try something else,
Mm,
but so much of your life has been devoted to this thing, and it's partly that you're so good at that one thing, but the other thing is that you don't really have another thing to go to.
mm.
Like a lot of golfers, there's actually a guy that just retired. His name's Ian Baker Finch. He played on tour and was a great men's golfer, and then he transitioned into broadcasting,
Okay.
and now he's retiring from that.
Okay.
But separate of that, it's like it can be a really crazy time for
Mhm.
pro athletes to try to transition.
Yeah.
And two, the other thing that was interesting as a caddy is watching the interaction between fans and the players
All right.
and seeing how, you watch these people on television and you get accustomed to that you know them, but they don't know
Mm.
you.
At all, right?
Exactly. And
But
so
you
then,
feel like you have a relationship with them, but like it's one-sided, right? They don't know you.
yeah.
Yeah.
So they'll just walk up and be friendly.
Yeah.
And then the pro is like not really sure how to handle it because they don't know them.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and it's nice when people kind of walk up to you and just are
Yeah.
friendly and kind of know
Yeah.
you, but it's also a little bit like, wait, what?
Hmm.
I don't know
Hmm.
you.
Yeah. I have like two reflections on what you're when you're talking.
Mm,
It's really beautiful. One is like, as you mentioned, it's not that easy to sustain something for that long, but also the transitioning that you've been making throughout your life in your career is kind of like you've stayed in the same area, but you move so much from like, working at a golf course to like working, really playing to caddying.
hmm.
So it's like you've changed your mindset, but like within the same similar container, which I think is a really beautiful thing to do because there's so many things that you can do, like even in the same field, right? And then
Yeah.
two, it's like how how do we meet life? And last time you and I had really beautiful conversations about sports and how they're like they become a story about life, they become a story about who we are. So it's like it's not just a game, it's not just like a round of golf, it's not just like a soccer game or any other. It's so much more, like all of those stories, how we play the game, how we are towards each other during that game, how we are as a team, or like in your case between the caddy and the golfer, like how that relationship happens and how you meet like adversities and how you succeed. It's like all of those stories are like the stories of our lives.
Hmm.
That's like there's such a parallel to like, life outside of sports. So I
Yeah,
was just
right,
thinking
right. It's
about
like
that as you're talking, how it's just so amazing. It's not just a sport, it's like a little mini container for life, essentially.
right.
Yeah.
Which it and I think that that's so interesting now with the virtual world where
Mm,
it's, we keep creating these virtual worlds that are like the real world, but they're not.
right.
I think I saw a post where a guy was saying, can I use the internet and can I use social media to create actual social interaction with people?
Right.
And I thought that's so funny. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because if you want to go out and meet people, but at the same time, it is good to have, like you said, from sports, it's a window into without maybe directly having to do it. And
Mm,
sports are, for me, and I remember one time I was at a tournament, another caddy, we were just hanging out
mm,
while our players were practicing. And he like came up with a game. Like there was a bucket and he had a golf club and a ball and he was like trying to flip stuff into the bucket and he was just being silly and saying,
mm-hmm.
What if we turn this into a game in like 100 years? This game is as big as golf." And I was pretty curmudgeon-y that day, so I was like, Charlie, this is a stupid game. There's no way it's gonna take on the life of golf.
Like it ain't happening, you know? Yeah.
But the reality is, all the sports we play, that's how they started. They were
Yeah.
just people that were like, you know, I find basketball is the interesting one where the guy had a peach basket and he
Hmm.
set it up on a stick, and then he was like, okay, let's throw a ball up there.
Hmm.
And then that turned into basketball.
Hmm. Yeah. And that,
So
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say too, like we connected on that because you also have a background in sports.
Sure. Yeah.
And so how did sports shape, your activity in life, what you wanted to be, what you enjoyed doing,
Mm.
all those different things?
Mm. Well, I think there's so many different routes that can take. But the first one that's coming to me, it's like, when you're talking about, your friend creating a sport or like somebody putting a stick in a basket and like creating a sport, it's really like a human need to want to socialize, to want to
Mm.
spend time together. And that's why we create sports, right? And so we can kind of like challenge ourselves and really test ourselves out against the other person or people or, however, whichever sport we're talking about. But it's like, for me, sports was almost like there were two aspects. Like one of them was like highly social, really spending time with friends and becoming like a really tight-knitted team, like when I played soccer, for example, which I did for many years, it was like, how can we become the best team, and how can we be there for each other in practice and in games and so on. But it's also like it's extremely meditative, it's like
Mm.
as soon as you like I remember, and I'm sure this applies to you as well, like as soon as you would like get into the game, like I would be extremely nervous beforehand, like just like my heart was beating, I was getting all sweaty, and it's like, how's this gonna go, like each time before like the ref like does the whistle thing, and then it starts and boom, you're like out of the starting gate, all the nerves, they just go flying back, and you're like in the zone for 90 minutes. It's like you're not, it's almost like you're in your body, but you're also not. You're just like interfacing with the ball and with people, and everything is moving so fast, and you're just like, it's like you're somewhere else, and you're like in this deep meditative state where you're starting to read where other people are going to pass the ball, where you're going to be, all this stuff, right? And then your mindset too, your mind starts to go, oh, this is not going well, or this is going really well, and you have to like work against that, right? Or with that, depending on how you're doing, if you're, up or behind or whatnot. It's like, so it's like it's social and it's individual at the same time, which I think is really kind of amazing, because you're developing both skills at the same time, but in like a safe container of sports,
Yeah, it's as I listen to you, so like golf is a more sort of individual sport.
Sure.
And specifically because when you play, even though you'll be in a group of other players, you're all
Hmm.
playing the golf course,
Hmm.
which is an interesting dynamic about the social aspect, but in a different way.
Yeah.
Um, but when you first brought that up, I was thinking, oh, I'm not that familiar with that
Mm.
because I played golf because of the individual nature of it.
Mm.
That it was a thing I could just go do by myself.
Wow.
And you can take it with you because it's just you. Like if you have your golf clubs and you go to a course, you can go anywhere in the world and play
Yeah.
golf.
Yeah.
But when I first got started, it was very social. The whole reason I played was because my dad played.
Sure.
And that's what was super fun, especially as a kid, to get to play with him.
Hmm.
And it's better now, but when I was a kid, they had a thing too about juniors. Like they didn't really let a lot of kids play
Mm.
because because golf is very much pop and circumstance about the etiquette, and small children are not necessarily great at that. Um,
Well.
exactly. And what's funny too is there's a lot of people that I meet even as adults that get nervous. And I'm like, oh, it's easy. If I teach you the etiquette,
Mm.
you're gonna look like you know how to play golf, even though you've never played a hole in your life.
Hmm.
And that can go a long way.
Yeah.
But too, I loved what you were saying because it made me think of how sports, I've heard of other sports. Like golf was actually I'm not exactly sure if this is the origin, but it was created by archers, like in
Oh, yeah.
Scotland. Yes, they archers were bored and they started whacking a ball around and like that's how the game got started.
All right.
But
Didn't know
but I'd
that.
also heard that football is another game that to me sport is the evolution of war, where it's two teams against each other,
Mm-hmm.
but we do it in a civilized way. And so when the winner beats the loser, we can just have a handshake and go have a meal. It doesn't, we
Yeah.
don't have to clean up the mess of a war. So everything you were saying about, being on a team and then too, this idea of how can we be our best as a team.
Mm.
But it's interesting because you still need an opponent, like because the whole idea that you want to try to be the best is that there's somebody you're trying to beat. If there's nobody to beat,
Mm-hmm.
what's the point of doing what you're doing?
Mm.
So yeah, that's great. And it really does instill it's a great way to practice a lot of the virtues and values of life,
Yes.
but in a fun way, in
Yeah,
a
in a
way,
fun way, a rewarding way, right?
yeah.
In a
And
way
also
where,
allows
like,
you to,
if you lose, like you said, if you lose, it's not like, you haven't killed 100,000 people, Somebody might have a bruise, but it's no big deal. They're gonna be fine a few days from now. So, and also learning that even though you're fighting, you're then approaching each other as people afterwards, both before and after the game, right? And hopefully
yeah,
during the game too, like what you were mentioning about the etiquette, that's like a way of being social too. You're showing that by knowing how to behave, by knowing how to go by all these different sort of underlying rules of the game, you are respecting other people.
yeah. What golf is another interesting game in that sense because it's also renowned for that you're sort of self-regulated.
Hmm. Right.
And that you're supposed to know the rules. And again, this has changed a little bit because with television now, uh, that most times a pro, if they're in a rules situation, they will call a rules official.
Hmm.
And but normally, like a lot of times when you're playing, if there's something going on and either the other players can see or I have to deal with something, you're supposed to like tell them what you're doing
Hmm.
and get the feedback from them.
Hmm.
That as a group, you look at the situation, determine what you think is correct, and then it's almost like a small court
Hmm.
where you say, "Hey, I hit it into the hazard. I need to take a drop.
Hmm.
Does this
What do
did
you
you
think about this? Yeah.
yeah, like is this okay?"
Yeah.
And whenever that people talk about this and they're the other players that have a say, it's what they think in the moment, and if they think that that player is trying to do something they shouldn't be doing, but there's also this term called protecting the field,
Mhm.
which is, if you and I are playing and I try to cheat, you're trying to stop me from cheating for you, but you're also held accountable because you're the only person there that can protect the rest of the people that we're competing against that don't have the ability to call me out and say, whoa, whoa, whoa,
Right.
what are you doing? That's crazy.
Mm.
Um, And I've been in situations like that where, things are happening and it's funny to watch somebody that's like trying to do something that
Mhm.
doesn't, and then there's like five other people that are like, no, that's not what we saw.
Mhm.
And they're just so adamant, like they want to win that badly.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, that communal aspect, um, it's interesting how much you can learn
Mm.
from it.
That's really, really amazing because, that reminds me of like a tribe. It's like how they say, you need a tribe to raise children. So, for example,
Yeah.
if like an adult isn't there, or a parent isn't there to tell your kid, hey, you should stop doing that. Like, that's not cool, whatever it is that they're doing. to have the allowance of another adult to step in and be like, you should stop doing that. And the same thing between adults in society, that to have the allowance between adults to say, you know what, I don't think that was such nice behavior. Like you should probably apologize to her. It's like we're educating each other, and it's really beautiful that golf has that already built into it, the kind of like you said, protecting the game, but I guess in life it would be like protecting life, like making
Yeah.
sure that people are not just like doing whatever and hurting other people.
Yeah, I'd heard something recently where I don't remember who, I think I want to say it was like a celebrity or something, but they were on a
Mm.
podcast and they were saying how as a society we've fallen away from that idea that
Yeah.
we don't tell people that they shouldn't be doing that or
Yeah.
and basically saying no, like stopping people from doing things.
Yeah.
And I personally think too, and I learned this what's so as a golfer, and it's kind of funny to me to like be on podcasts and like talk
Mm.
because when I was a kid, part of why I played golf too is I was super quiet. So it made sense. I loved being playing the game where you're supposed to be quiet most of the time, and
Mm.
even when you talk quietly. Um, But so that taught me, I started from there, right? I started from silence and
Mm.
two, that was also my caddying style. And
Mm.
I would say that works well at a very high level, that when you're coaching people that are really good at what they do
Mm.
and they're highly sensitive, you really just have to provide space because they're gonna figure it out.
Mm.
Um, but there's also times where, especially as a caddy, your job, they've hired you to give them advice,
Mm.
to utilize you and your skill set and to say something when they're saying something that is inaccurate.
Mhm.
And that goes back to that, how do you say something and how do you have a confrontation with somebody
Mhm.
and say, hey, I don't like what you're doing, or um, but still communicate that in a way
Mm.
that you're taking ownership of your power and you're taking ownership of your thoughts and feelings
Mhm.
and you're giving that person feedback so that they can be better with that feedback while at the same time not condemning them too much
Mhm.
for the fact, okay, yeah, they made a mistake, but we all make mistakes.
Of
So
course. Yeah.
so to try to communicate that, but the number of times that I didn't speak up in situations because my player would say something and my first thought was like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And then I would just spin like, I thought you were really good at golf and I cannot believe you're thinking that. And I don't know that I've ever thought this before, but it's interesting how, at least in the States right now, that what I'm describing right there is the
Mm.
main problem for how we view politics
Mm.
and how you can't have a conversation with somebody
Right.
because they say something and then you're just like, your brain goes with these judgments. And
Yeah.
now it's like, okay, how do I own that?
Yeah.
How do I own my own
Mhm.
lack of whatever that put me in this
Right.
situation and be able to talk about this and come up with a solution because ultimately that's what we're trying to do.
Exactly. And to not polarize it so much, because it's like things are already so polarized that if you try to start to have a conversation, it can very quickly end up in like you or me, it's like it's hard to
Yes.
meet in the middle. But, you know, I'm thinking about your evolution of like being the silent kid into being the lone player into being the one who is communicating and communicating more and more, like your own reflection of being on a podcast now, and also, potentially wanting to be a coach as well, where you're both holding containers for people, but also communicating with people. And I think that as I'm sort of reading patterns, I'm seeing that that's the evolution that humankind is going through as well. From being like this very individual person who has to figure out everything on their own to like being connected to someone to figuring things out together to like actually communicating. And like you said, you probably done the same mistake as that guy who was on the golf course. And, we've done it in life too, where we make mistakes. But when we're making the mistake, we would hope that somebody would be like, hey, maybe you should think about that one more time. And it's vice
Mhm.
versa. If someone else makes a mistake, it's like, oh, maybe, is it okay for us to communicate about this before you make this mistake? Right. So it's
Yeah.
so, to me, I see like we're moving into this collaboration more, from this individualistic person who's like, I got this, to talking to each other and figuring it out together. It's like we're rebuilding those tribes or those communities or those like safe spaces where we can interact with each other again and find solutions together, like you were saying.
Yeah, I like what you just said there at the end, the find solutions together. Because
Mm,
I just heard something yesterday where, and two, everything you're saying, it's like I love that reflection of society and how I was also thinking as you were saying that, because I agree with that. Like as we evolve or grow into the next rendition of what it is to be humans on the planet,
mhm,
I was also thinking about the impact of the internet
mm,
and how, but I think of, and I did this as a caddy, right? Where, so you have a yardage book that shows the course and it like gives you information. You can take notes because
mm,
you can't remember everything. And then every day you also get a pin sheet that shows you where the whole location is on each green. So it's information for that day, but it's also a piece of paper and you can keep notes on like the
mm,
score or stats. But I would also write down mindset stuff.
mm,
And for me again, my by nature, I'm more like my default is sort of like humble or freeze fawn. So what motivates me is usually having permission to be intense. Or when it came to caddying, I would literally write, uh, and because I'm not sure of the parameters, but I won't say the actual word, but the F word, and be um, like I don't effing care, because I cared too much. Like I'm sort of a perfectionistic person by nature.
mm,
And so what freed me up was like saying that and acting like, no, 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 we're just out here having fun.
mm,
And when you gave the example of the person that was trying to win and how a person that there's people that push too hard in an effort to create something, and there's people that don't push hard enough in an effort to create something. And either way, we need each other. Like throughout my life, I've always felt like I wanted people to give me more feedback and to sort of push me, even though I know I'm the first one to tell you I don't really like being pushed.
mm,
Or if people coach me and I didn't ask for it,
mhm,
it's there's a real quick sense of and it's usually passive aggressive. That's the trick is like I'm not pushing, so I want you to push me, and then I use you to push against. Um, but the thing I was going to say about the internet too is, to me, the internet was like my pin sheet. It's this thing we've come up with an idea as a society because it's tons of people that created computers and connected computing, and then now this thing is mirroring back ourselves to us, and we're using it, social media, and there's a lot of sort of silly ways that we're using it, but there's also a lot of really cool ways that we're using it.
mm,
And I find that so fascinating
mm,
that we're still, to me, we're still growing through it. That like the internet is like at its teenage years.
mhm.
And
Absolutely.
we all know what that's like to be teenage.
Hmm,
It's a
hmm.
tumultuous time of like sorting out our individuality and our social aspect, but from our own individual sense.
All right. No, I love that because, and it's also like you said about the silly stuff, it's almost like we had to also go through that of it becoming kind of like, I have 150,000 friends on Facebook or whatever, right? And they all know my birthday because, it's on there, right?
Sure.
like who is actually a really my friend on there, right? Who do I actually communicate with? And I think we had to kind of like go through that as a species of, is it really that we're looking for in other people, or are we
Hmm.
looking at like true communion and true connection between each other? And when we start to create these connections now, which I believe that we're sort of moving into that phase now where we're starting to use it to our advantage instead, right? We're starting to make connections. Like, for example, you and me, we would have never met if it wasn't for the internet, right? We wouldn't
Exactly.
have really connected possibly, and we wouldn't have this conversation, and we wouldn't really know that we have a lot of things in common. So there's this opportunity to, like, if in your own community you don't really know many people who have maybe the same interests as you, or maybe the same like perspective or outlook on life, then there's this like beautiful opportunity now on the internet to meet other people that are, so how should I say it, similar to you in a sense, to where you can really find a true connection, and possibly even
Yeah.
a deeper connection than with your neighbor, who lives right down the street.
Yes, and that like back in 2010, it was the first time I took a year off of caddying, and I didn't really have a lot of my friends were golfers and people that I knew from tour, and so
Mm,
I had some friends because I had worked at a golf course when I was in college, so there were some people that I knew, but we had already started to grow apart a little bit,
mm.
and I utilized the internet and this website called meetup.com
Right.
where you go and you type in an activity
Yeah,
and
I
then it
remember.
pulls,
Hmm.
because I live in Phoenix
Yeah.
and I grew up in a smaller town in Minnesota and I
Mm,
noticed how no matter where you are, it's like you're saying about Facebook friends. It's like, yeah, in the virtual world, you can have thousands of friends, but in your day-to-day interaction, unless you're like a pop star or a pro athlete,
hmm.
you're not going to interact with tens of thousands of people.
No.
You're going to see the people you live with, you're going to see the people at work, you're going to see the people that at the store that maybe
Hmm.
you recognize because they work certain days. And but if you go just beyond like a mile or two from your home, if you live in a decent sized metropolitan area,
Oh, yeah.
there is so much diversity and complexity.
Yeah.
And so to have the internet to like filter that down for you and just to type in a few words and it says, oh, there's people on this way over like 45 minutes away,
Hmm.
but they love what you love.
Yeah.
So if you go over there, you guys can hang out. And then sure enough, you will meet these random people, but they're your tribe in a sense.
Exactly.
And um and then I was, as you were saying that too, I was also thinking about how I think you said something earlier about, our thoughts and how um I just have this idea of like, being alive and having thoughts and seeing possibility is really, really great.
Mm.
But it's also really challenging because you have to be responsible for the negative thoughts.
Yeah.
Um, and so, this internet and technology is really, really great, but it's funny how there's some people that are still coming from a place of fear,
Yeah.
and then they're using this to be like, okay, well, we gotta and it's funny how this idea of like we have to protect people
Hmm.
because people are bad, and so we have to protect them from themselves or
Yeah.
from the bad group when it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I don't think they've woken up yet to it's
Yeah.
like no, 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 you're that thing that you're trying to protect the world from.
I love that. It's like, and I think we touched upon that a little bit too in our previous conversation on how, like, if you actually haven't faced your own demons, your own shadows, whatever you want to talk, call it your own darkness, you don't even realize that you're actually the one who's creating it. Like, the more fear that you're feeling about those other guys, and like you said, who we need to protect ourselves against, and all these things, it's like all it's showing you is like your own stuff. You got to clean up within yourself before you can start to worry about everyone else. And it's kind of like being on social media is interesting. To me, the fact that you have energy to put down a negative comment to someone, it just blows my mind.
Mm.
It's like how come you like feel like you have to, how come you have energy for that? How come you think that that's worth your while to write something for, 30 seconds that's basically hurting another person? But what it tells me also is that you're very unhealed, right? You have a lot of things inside of you that you haven't looked at, and you have a lot of judgments that you haven't looked at. And because we live in like inverted universe, what that means is like everything that you have in here, you're also creating on the outside. So you're part of the wars, the genocide, the you name it, right? That's like what's happening within you as well. And I think when you open up your mind to that, and when you start to realize, like, if you sit down in meditation for 15 minutes, you'll start to see all your crazy thoughts, right? And you start to realize, like, wow, like I'm the one who's actually creating this chaos both within me and outside of me. And then when you start to then look at that and take responsibility for that, like you had mentioned earlier in this call, taking responsibility for those negative thoughts, that's when you can start to shift things. That's when you can like have the power to start to change both you and people around you, because you're completely aware that you're both light and darkness, right? It's not, you're not just one thing.
Yes. Yeah, so just to touch on what you said about the comments, and what I think, I was talking to my girlfriend last night, and I was talking
Mm,
about posting on social media,
mm,
and she's like, "Oh my God, it stresses me out." And I'm like, "Wait, me talking about posting on social media stresses you out, or are you thinking about you posting on social media?" And she goes, "Oh yeah, the thought of me posting on social media."
oh,
And she's never done it before. And my background is, even when I was really young, even though I was introverted,
mm.
I loved the exhilaration of giving a speech.
Oh,
Like
okay.
there, as much as that was terrifying, it felt
Mm.
somewhat comfortable to me. It was almost like because it was this idea that I knew everybody felt that way then. Like and because it I felt sort of stressed normally, it was like,
Mhm.
okay, well, knowing that everybody's stressed, and then also you would watch, especially young people giving speeches.
Mhm.
We don't know what we're doing, and so it was fun to do it. And then as I got into more performance stuff, playing in golf tournaments, having people watch me,
Mm.
the only difference is I think it's different when you're having somebody watch you do something that you think you're good at.
All right.
Because I think that's the problem. If you just say,
Um,
hey, how about you do this thing publicly that you
mm.
suck at? Of course, that's going to be terrifying.
Yeah.
Um, but why I've always liked it, because even at a young age, I felt good at it, and I felt like people were watching me because I was good. So then as I progressed, and people are like, what about the pressure? And it's like, there's no pressure. If anything, it helps me
Mm.
because I think I'm good, and they're actually expecting me to do well.
Mm.
And then it's just me against myself, which
Mhm.
I've always been somewhat highly aware of anyways, which leads me to my other point. So I just follow this path, right? And I end up caddying, and I think I made a video the other day, and I was talking about how, so without shining too bright a light on the specific president of our country right now,
Mm. Mm.
um I've never met the man, but I've been close to him, and I've got a lot of friends that are close with him. And that is so bizarre to me. That I'm like, on one hand, I'm just a guy. And then on this other hand, I do have this influence, or I have influenced people in a particular way because I learned that skill and went to those places.
Mm.
And, but the reality is, we all have that. We all have that capacity. And then it's just a matter of, are you using it for something? Um, with your comments on the internet?
Mm.
Do you feel like you matter? Do you feel like what you say is going to change somebody's world for the better?
Mm.
Or if you think that you're an insignificant thing and that like my take is that that's a lot of times when people say something like that, they're saying it from a place of like, well, I don't matter, so I don't, it's like they're not going to listen to me anyways. And that's not true. People do listen to you. And, you and I in our program with the background of creating online content media, it's like practicing putting stuff on the internet will teach you sort of both sides that people don't listen, but also some people do. It's like
Mm-hmm.
it's so interesting to make a video into on TikTok and somebody says they like it or they agree with what you said. And it's like, oh, wow, that's so cool
Mm-hmm.
that I connected with this person.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and for me, because I do put a lot of energy in trying to say things that are uplifting as opposed to um, negative. But I also, it's like when you first said, it, I just thought there's a lot of space. I think people think of the internet as this like, well, it doesn't really matter, and I'm just gonna like speak it into the void and nobody pays attention. But it does also shock me that like with a comment, you can actually type it out and then read what you wrote. It's not like when you say something, you say it, then it disappears. It's only the impact that it has on you and the other person.
Mm-hmm.
But like when you type something and then you hit return, that thing's sitting there. And like you're gonna read it and other people are gonna read it, and it's gonna be like, what did you mean by that? And if you didn't know, um, that still just boggles my mind, where it's like people can type stuff and it's like things that seem pretty directly negative, and
Mm-hmm.
then it's a fun game for me to be like, what are they trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that I don't think people inherently, I think everybody is trying to make the best choices they can so that there is some kind of positive intent driver there. But then when people say something negative or, you're so stupid or you don't know what you're talking about, it's like, okay, well, what are you saying that you're not saying?
What are you talking about that you're not talking about? You know?
Yeah.
So it's like you're reacting against something, but you're also not taking a stance really for anything, right? So it's like you get caught in that loop of, and I really appreciate you talking to the point of like being seen and being heard and being like validated because I think, as you said, a lot of it behind that is actually that you want to be seen, you want to be heard, and you want to be validated, but maybe you don't feel like you have enough to say, or you may be even scared of putting your opinion out there because you
Mm.
feel like other people will, say something about what you have to say, or, whatever it might be. But I really appreciate you sort of pontificating upon like what is it that actually is going on, what's actually going on behind that whole thing, and what type of energy are you kind of like sending out and receiving, and it's because in my experience, it's like when you send something out, like you said, that's uplifting and has like a beautiful message, it's a very expansive feeling,
Yes.
it's light, it's like energetically, it feels pretty flexible and fun, and but then when you see something, let's say you're watching a video who's like more negative content, or like you come across something that's, it feels so like constrictive and like limiting, right, in its
Hmm.
energy. So it's just so interesting how that energy, how that feels, how does it feel to leave a negative energy imprint versus like a positive energy imprint. And I think we all know what that feels like because we've all sort of been there at one point in our lives, or many times where we're just like completely like, oh, screw this, and we feel like it's like that constructive, heavy energy. And then on days where we feel pretty amazing and it's like, yeah, I can do it. It's such a different, it's like you're living in two different worlds.
Yeah, yeah, because speaking to that directly, so this is something that I've, like in our program, and obviously when you're making content,
Mm,
you will also learn the places in which you're not comfortable being seen
mm.
because you make a video and you love it and then nobody watches it or they watch it and they leave a negative comment and then you really have to grapple with that of like number one, were you clear about what you were saying? And if you were, and if it was positive, then it doesn't really matter what happens after that.
Mm,
Um, but from all the golf, right? So, and the fact that uh, I feel like I got really good at receiving. So when it comes to negative stuff, and also when I was little, I was shaped very much by the idea of Jesus Christ. Not so much Christianity and the dogma, but
mm.
as a young child, just hearing these stories about this incredible person
Right.
in my opinion, whose purpose and the way he lived his life was that he was going to receive all the negativity. Now, and sort of jokingly, I always go one step further and say, yeah, well, if you could resurrect yourself from death, you'd do that too.
Mm,
It's actually not that big a deal. If you can overcome death, then taking all the negativity is not that big of a deal. Um, so I caddy and I really work on trying to become a good listener um and again I was motivated because when you're working for a player who whatever mistakes they're making or whatever mistakes I'm making that are holding us back against what we want, it's negativity we have to deal with and we want to be responsible for it. We're working so hard to try to focus on the positive
mm,
and that the only way really to be successful is to transmute the negative into the positive. Because if you keep holding it against yourself, you just stay stuck.
mm,
And but then I do that and I'm able to help a player win and I'm able to go to the Olympics.
mm,
And then I get to this point where it's like, all right, well now I want to start sharing this message. And um real quick about the two different worlds. It's like if somebody is like in such a negative place, right? And they just keep going down and down and down and down and down. And part of that is because they're suppressing their light, because everything they're trying to do to shine their light is not being seen and they're not being affirmed as a positive contributive source to society.
mm,
But then you get so suppressed that all there is I love Wayne Dyer's analogy of like when you squeeze an orange,
mm,
orange juice comes out. That's what's inside.
mhm.
So when you squeeze a person, whatever comes out, that's what's in there.
Yeah.
And so
I
if you
love that. I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but I absolutely love that. Go on, continue.
so when a person is, in a pressurized situation, and again, the internet is funny because it is like it supposes that the person didn't have to leave a comment,
Mm,
but we're all living in a society that still has pressure from a lot of different perspectives.
yeah.
So when that person is squeezed, if they leave a negative comment, but my life is so much better that I would think, man, what are they talking about? I would never say something like that.
Mhm,
But then if you can try to put yourself in their shoes and even go one step further and put yourself in their shoes in an even worse place to where it's like, oh, that's not even that bad what they said. They could have done something way worse. Or I remember I coached a person years ago. I joined a program and I was able to coach other participants for free. And it was super fun. And this person, we talking at the end of the day, and I said, "Hey, how did your day go?" And they, well, it was a pretty tough day. It was one of those days where, I really wanted to stab somebody. And I was like, "Yeah, I get it." And then I go, "Hey, thanks for not stabbing anybody. Like, you did a great job at not stabbing anybody today in the midst of that you wanted to do it."
mhm,
And then we both laughed. And it was fun for me that like again, it was over the phone. This is a person I'd never met. And I
mhm.
think part of that space is what allowed them to say something so outlandish, but also authentic for them.
Yeah.
And then my perspective was genuine. Like, hey, in terms of stabbings, we a zero, that's a good
We're
day.
good. You know?
Yeah, so let's celebrate. Like
Yeah.
you're having a bad day, but there is actually something to celebrate here.
45 days of zero stabbing, you know, and counting.
Exactly. And so and then here's the other thing I would say. So having looked at this for myself, I think there's a phase of communication that if in your life you haven't communicated, which I'm somewhat experienced with, the first stage oftentimes look like I'm gonna say the mean thing. You know, F this. I have a voice and I've been holding all this in and I gotta let it out and I gotta tell everybody how stupid I think they are. That's not gonna go very well. I've tried it a couple times. Nobody likes hearing it. So that's usually the first stage of telling the truth. But one of the ways I think about it is if your truth doesn't include love, it doesn't include a sense of love and affinity between you and the person you're talking to, that it's not actually the truth. Like you haven't gotten to the full truth yet. And like you were saying, of like that space of expansiveness where you can be a big person and they can be a big person and you get to be two big people together, that's the best feeling. But if I have to be big and you have to be small, that doesn't work. If you get to be big and I have to be small, that doesn't work. But if somehow we can both communicate in a way and communication can free flow where I can say what there is to say, but it doesn't diminish me and it doesn't diminish you, well, now we can make something together. Um, and so, and then I would also say in our world, what helped me develop this was balancing out the feminine aspect. Like working with women taught me a lot, but I still every day have to remind myself of like, it's good to soften. It's good to be vulnerable. It's good to open up and look at like, what am I receiving? Because I just had a conversation with a friend yesterday and was talking about it's so hard to ask for help. It can be so hard to ask for help. And yet, if we don't do that, then it's easy for the world to just, oh yeah, the world, at least here in America, there's a solution to every problem. But I think for guys, as a guy, I don't know, but I feel like in general, if we could have a society that would be more willing to open up and talk about the problems they're having instead of just act like everything's all right.
Right.
So
Wow. I'm blown away. It was really incredible. Every single thing that you said and how you summarize things so beautifully about, the human dilemma and the societal, difficulties and how to reconcile that through both love and communication. I think that's really absolutely amazing.
thank
Thank
you.
you for that.
I appreciate you mirroring that back. And I was the last time when you used the word pontificate, which I love,
Hmm.
uh, just because it sounds fancy. And
Maybe,
I
but it's also like that's what you're doing, you know?
I love looking words up because I I would say as much as I struggle with the sort of being vulnerable and the feminine, I'm a very curious person.
Mm,
Um, but when you first said it, I kind of chuckled too because I've been fortunate as a caddy. Like anybody that's ever played golf or watched golf,
mm,
it's a slow game. Like you spend most of the time walking from shot to shot. And again, amateur golfers are going to ride in golf carts, and so you're not really paying attention. But at the pro level, why I had a job as a caddy was the player had to walk and I had to walk.
mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of philosophizing and just like observing life that I got to do over the years. And also just being in nature. Like it's one of the things that I love about the game. But yeah, there's been a lot of times where I'm just like looking at life and trying to understand life
Mm-hmm.
really for myself.
Mm,
And then as I understand it, like you would do with anybody that you care about, you would try to pass on information that's helpful to them.
yeah.
and
As
say,
you're saying that, I'm sort of again thinking about like the sport and the life analogy of, okay, so something happens, you hit the golf ball, there's an activity that happens, right? And it goes
right?
well, or it goes well, or it goes really horribly, right? Then you are allowed the space to kind of walk it off, walk over to your ball, find it somewhere, in a good place, in a bad place, whatever, and then you get to the next point of in your life where you have another action, now you hit the ball again, and it's sort of, and that's kind of how life is, right? Like we have this moment of activity, something happens, that can be good, can be bad, can be, and then we have a little bit of a space until the next thing happens. So it's like we're allowed this kind of integration, pontification, reflection for our next move, our next
Mm,
shot, our next, how we're going to approach this next thing. And the space that we're spending in between there, it's what's going to define if the next activity is going to be good or not so good,
totally,
right? It's that
totally.
deep reflection, deep mindset, like, okay, how can I do this? How can I be better? How can I, and then you go on to the next activity in your life or shoot the ball in case of golf. Yeah.
Well, and this was something I learned like 20 years ago from these two instructors that both women, and I only say that because there's so many women that, and two, I was in my early 20s and I was insecure and there was an opportunity to learn from them and I was like, what's a girl gonna teach me about golf? And then later on, I was going to make some changes and they invited me to come to their program. And I learned so much in the first 30 minutes. And I'm like, they're so smart. And then as I got to spend time with them, realizing it's like, well, of course they're going to teach me things. They're seeing the world from a completely different perspective. Like they have insight into these things that I've never even considered. But the big one was they understood brain science and they'd first taught me this idea about it's the way in which we interpret the situation that then highlights, like that's what gets highlighted in our brain. That's why we emotionalize things. Like an emotion is a feeling in the body, but when you feel something, whether intensely positive or intensely negative, it gets highlighted in your brain. And now your brain is doing one of two things. It's either trying to recreate that good experience or it's trying to avoid the negative experience. And then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Mhm.
So this was very helpful at the time because I didn't understand that for myself. And I was to a point where I didn't like playing golf because the my mind was working against itself without even knowing that I could direct it in a different direction because no one had ever taught me that.
Mhm.
But now once they shine a light on that, I was fascinated with this like uh just the spawn. It's like once somebody points that like turns that light on, how quickly you can change and get different results. Like
Absolutely.
just by being able to imagine something differently.
Yeah.
And then 20 years later, it's what you were referring to, which is the time between the shots. Because I also think about I've been very fortunate to like caddy for many really good rounds. And what's funny about a good round of golf and a bad round of golf in terms of that walking process are really not that different. Like it's such a minute difference between the good days, you're just a little bit more positive and there's a little bit more energy and it tends to build on itself over 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
And then a bad day is just it's a little bit negative, but it's really hard to like it's it's hard to notice, but it's easy to be slightly negative as opposed to slightly positive. And that you can, if you're slightly negative, you can play, and almost be like sort of lost and think like, oh, that was a pretty good day. And then you get done and you look at the score and it's 76, which for pros is not very good.
Mm.
And then there's other days where there was a round last year that my player shot 62 in a qualifier in Germany. And to some extent, I knew what was happening while we were doing it, but it was also like it, it, we are just doing what we were doing. And on this particular round, it was working really well.
Mm.
And then you get done and then you look back and two, we were enjoying it. Like during the process, we were enjoying it.
Mm.
Um, but to what you were saying of like at the end of it, it's if you can't enjoy that time in between spaces,
Mhm.
if you're too focused on um, it's good to have the action be a particular way, but
Yeah.
if you want it to turn out a certain way,
Mm.
it's that usually doesn't go very well.
You know, how it's really great that you're speaking to this because it's what I'm seeing in front of me is like the two sides of the same coin, right? You have one day and you have this coin and you can have this slightly negative experience or you can have the slightly positive experience, but it's still the same day, right?
Yes.
Still like your experience of walking from one point to the next, having a conversation, waking up in the morning, doing your breakfast, like you're having the same day and you're maybe not even noticing if it's like slightly this way or slightly that way. And the day happens. And so it's
Mhm.
it's almost like there's nothing, there's no difference between the positive and the negative spectrum even in our experience sometimes, we experience it almost the same way. It's sort of more the emotion in the body, right? How that feeling is affecting our system.
Yes.
But definitely from the outside, it's like nobody can look in you really and be like, oh, he's having a terrible day or she's having a great day, possibly, right? Unless you look like this one day and the next.
Right.
But there's such a slim difference. Like I think we tend to look at things in duality of like it's either, light or dark. But I think sometimes it's sort of both, and it's okay for it to be both on different days. And it's not it's maybe both. It's like it's an and situation. It's light and dark. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, it does. Like the first thing I'm present to is and this is why like when you brought up pontificate and I said I look words up,
Mm,
I think words are incredibly powerful
yes.
because they are the veil between the positive and the negative.
Right.
Because yes, it's like you're walking and there's a certain amount of energy in your body,
Mm-hmm.
but the difference between anger
Mm,
and joy
mm.
is really just the difference of how you're describing that experience. And it's so surreal to even say that, right? Because I'm
Yeah.
still human. Like there's a lot of times where I'm immersed in my anger and then
Yes.
people are like, be happy and it's like,
Yeah.
fuck,
Yeah.
no, I'm not going to be angry.
Just
Oh,
change
just
your
change.
experience.
Yeah, change your language, call it joy. And it's
Ah,
like, oh, and be a liar?
yeah.
And and that's the other aspect of it, of like this the power of a human being. I also have a very specific definition. Like for me, the only thing I need to be worried about in terms of lying is if I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm the only one. My definition of lying is the intent to deceive,
Mm-hmm.
which doesn't even make sense. Like it does because I do lie, but I do lie on purpose, right? It's fun to prank somebody or with your significant other,
Mm-hmm.
know that they're expecting a certain reaction from you
Mm-hmm.
and giving them a different one on purpose to see how they'll react. Um, but inherent with that too is if they call you out on being mischievous, which is
Mm-hmm.
just quick slide into evilness,
Mm-hmm.
you're not afraid to admit it, which
Mm-hmm.
means you can get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but also specifically when people say, "Oh, that person lied," it's like I don't know their intention.
Right.
I rarely know my intention.
Mm-hmm.
So why am I trying to worry about what I think they're doing
Mm-hmm.
and that because also the definition of evil is like, okay, so wait, you're telling me they actually have a better solution for us, but because they're evil, they're hiding the good solution and giving us a bad solution
Mm-hmm.
just to piss us off and then deal with us being pissed off at them. That doesn't make any sense. It's much more prevalent that they are either ignorant
Mm-hmm.
and which borderlines on stupid, but to me, ignorance is true, like not knowing.
Yeah.
Like they're just trying to do what they're doing from a good perspective.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, at the end of the day, like there was a program I did years ago where I learned this idea of how our presence and our language affects things.
Yeah.
And the guy leading the course, he would write on a chalkboard and he would talk to us and he goes, so here's what I'm actually, right? So the whole weekend he's talking and he goes, but if you take the talking away, here's what I'm doing. And he would go out to us and he'd go like that. And then he'd turn around and he'd make a motion on the board and he'd turn around and go like that. And it's like, yeah, effectively we're just doing what we're doing.
Mm.
And yet how we interpret that internal thing, which then affects how we interpret the external thing,
Hmm.
then it really creates what you would call your inner world, which is the world. Because the state of people and how at peace they are, and whether they're complaining or whether they're cooperating.
Hmm.
Because I also find that funny how people say, like, oh, the world is competitive. And it's like, yeah, but competition is also cooperative. Like, as much as you have two teams as adversarials, they are in sort of a weird dance together.
They are, sure.
And without the one team, you don't have the dance. You don't
Hmm.
have the game.
Or the evolution of, becoming better
Exactly.
and so
Because
on and so forth.
it's like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, humans are still possible. It's capable for them to do bad things, but
Mhm.
there's more good going on.
Yeah.
Like we trust each other in so many different ways with money and safety um and it's like, yeah, we're still working on it. But again, that fundamental bias
Mm.
of can and another thing I learned from the coaches, which was um and this was my introduction to meditation, which
Mm.
is can you get back to that neutral point?
Right.
Because if you are having a quote unquote bad day or negative experience, to
Hmm.
jump to positive is like a really big gap. But it's like, well, can you just get to that point where you can stop judging it negatively?
Hmm.
Which is can also be quite difficult. Like you were
Yeah.
saying it's like in meditation, I find meditation so funny because it's so many people get started and it's like, I'm not supposed to think.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, if you sit still, all you're gonna notice is your thoughts. You're gonna notice that you're thinking most of the time.
Yeah. And there's a
And
lot
it's
of crazy stuff that goes on in there, right? So,
yeah.
but like you
And that,
said, coming back to that neutral space is it's extremely effective. And also, you know, becoming that observer, the observer of like, I'm having a bad day,
yeah.
or the observer of like, I'm having a great day. And why is this triggering me? And why am I upset? And why do I have these thoughts? I think that's what meditation helps you with, like pulling back and looking at it from more of like an ego's perspective and realizing that all these things are happening within you, all these emotions, all these thoughts, but you don't necessarily have to like throw out your lasso and hang on to those. You could just be like, okay, bye bye, like, and and in that, starting to realize that there is a difference between you and the stuff that appears to be you, your inner world, or what you referred to it as before, which I thought was really nice, which becomes your reality, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, because it's I can't remember which guru, but he wrote a book and it's only like 40 pages, but it's all that you question the I. Like
Mm.
whenever you're looking at an experience,
Yeah.
you look at who is the person that you say you are that's having that experience.
Yeah.
And that will get you in touch with that observer.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I first got introduced to that too as a golfer,
Yeah.
this idea of control.
Yeah.
And some coaches said, "What can you control on the golf course?"
Yeah.
And I got to watch a group of people do it, and it was so funny to
Mm.
watch them, but also really fun to see people that can embody the space of like listening to the answer that's not the answer. Like, well, I can control my golf swing, right? I move my body. I can, and
Mm.
then they would say, well, how come you don't shoot 65 every day? If
Exactly.
you can control that, why is it so sporadic?
Yeah.
Oh, I guess I
Yeah.
can't control
Right.
that.
And if you can control your thoughts, how come they're happening all the time? Without you being able to stop them or start them or think exactly what you want to think at any given time. That doesn't work either, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
And so, and this is something that I still contemplate quite deeply, which is that, and two, this idea of like, do we have free will?
Right.
And this like choice
Yeah.
that, um, and my take is, and I haven't said this in a while, so I appreciate this conversation to highlight this again, is
Mm,
that to me, the paradox of life is like sometimes I think that the actions of life are predetermined,
hmm
and you're gonna go, like it's already set out the things I'm gonna do and or not do in my life. And that's on the physical plane. But on the sort of the inner world or the metaphysical plane is I still have the ability to choose whether or not I'm gonna like receive that and enjoy it, or am I
hmm
going to resist it and
Yeah.
then worry and be stressed and say this shouldn't be happening, and then because this shouldn't happen, there's other things that shouldn't happen.
Mm.
Um, and so, and at the end of the day, I come back to like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And this dance, and then too, like living life. But again, it's like if you really do embrace the space of I don't know and being open to receiving,
hmm
then the work you think you need to do in the world. And it's like, sure, I think all humans want to contribute and they want to do something and make the world a better place, um, whether that's art or literally like building buildings.
hmm
But do you have the capacity to be vulnerable? Are you willing to ask for help
mm
and allow other people to help you? And again, I think the internet nowadays shows more and more examples of people are actually incredibly generous and they're willing to help people once they get to that breaking point and will ask for help.
hmm
Um,
Oh, I love that. You said they're willing to help other people once they're able to ask for help themselves.
yes.
There's some deep wisdom in that. It works both ways, right? It's receiving and giving. It's always both. It's like that energy can't exist with just having one thing happen, right? So
Yes.
I really love that. That's like really, that's great.
Yeah, I'm realizing too from the conversation we had last and then this one,
Mm,
uh, it's really fun when you have a conversation with somebody where I have the experience that you listen to my thoughts and you're looking for the goodness in it.
mm,
And so then you see the goodness in it, and then to be received as someone who's creating goodness because the person who's receiving it sees the goodness,
mm.
and I try to do that as well.
Right.
Um and I think there's a magic too to the fact that we're both uh somewhat open to that there is darkness in this as well, like, and that we can't resist that. So it's okay, there's space there if
There's
it
space
comes
for
up,
that. Hmm
and we're just going to let it be. And
hmm
then, and then we can talk about it if it needs to be talked about. But it is funny because then it's like all of a sudden, if I'm in a pretty good spot and you're in a pretty good spot, it's amazing how quickly you
Yeah.
just have this like very uplifting, very
I
powerful
know.
conversation.
I know.
And then it's like, oh, the negative stuff doesn't
Thank
exist.
you so much, Andrew. I'm like, I really want, I think we should end it here because what you said just now is just absolutely amazing. And I just feel like it's been like building up to this beautiful crescendo of thoughts and just, sharing ideas and sharing like this beautiful wisdom. It's almost like it's coming through you, as you're talking about this. So I really, really appreciate that. And I appreciate you coming on and I appreciate you sharing, everything that you've shared today. And I'm sure we'll be talking again at some point, continue on this conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been my pleasure to share and to be received in such an empowering way.
Mm, amazing. Okay, have a great day and we'll talk again soon.
All right,
Take
you
care.
too. Bye.
Bye.